Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Today we are going through all the latest injuries before game week 9. We're going to go through team lineups, predicted lineups from you, Ben. But yeah, how are you doing today?
Bad. 16 press conferences on Friday, 12 within the last hour. So between 1 and 2 p.m., 12 press conferences, still catching up, still in the midst of everything. So what I would say, the caveat ahead of this show, the actual predicted lineups that will be working from today went live on Wednesday night. So we can talk through those changes, potential absences, potential returners, but the actual lineups won't be locked in at the moment. This is a working document. I will systematically be going through team by team to get all of those nailed down, obviously, well before the deadline. But just for now, just to reiterate, we are hot off the press. Literally, like I say, in the midst of updating all 12 of the press conferences, which have just happened in the last 60 minutes or so.
Yeah, and so this is the thing where we're going live. We're going to talk through everything. And so we're going to go alphabetically, but people do put in your messages in the comments box. You know, ask away, ask anything, because there's quite a few, I think, potential big discussions. I don't want to spoil anything or make any assumptions, but Mitrovic was one of the kind of big names being discussed. But let's start off with Bournemouth then. So looking at the team here, is there any news that people need to be aware of post press conference?
Yeah, not massively. Fortunately, we heard from interim boss Gary O'Neill on Thursday. So this team, as it stands, is locked in. Obviously, the Cherries came up to our place just before the international break and left with a highly respectable 1-1 draw, a share of the spoils there. Now, there was one change on that day, and that was the loss of Lloyd Kelly, which seen Senesi, the Argentine defender, come into that back line. So based on that performance and the fact that they have basically nobody else returning from the treatment room, I'm leaving that Bournemouth lineup as is. Like I say, Bournemouth unbeaten under the interim boss, but it's a tough ask to go to Anfield and leave with anything.
So with the Bournemouth back line, a lot of people are interested in Dominic Solanki. Is he going to be fine? And I guess a question to you, Ben, would you be bringing him into your FPL team?
Well, we're expecting Solanki to be absolutely fine, of course, because we heard from Gary O'Neill on Thursday. There's still one session still to go, so we can never categorically state that a player will be 100% when they still have sessions to go. Would Dominic Solanki appeal to me? Not really. Yeah, there's been a slight upturn in performances following the departure of Scott Parker. But look, on paper, he looks to be a little bit of value, but I don't really see what Bournemouth are bringing to the party at this moment in time. I'd rather invest my money elsewhere. I think for in and around the same price, you're picking up the likes of maybe a Kieran Trippier and even banking some change. He offers clean sheet potential, but also has been a bit of an attacking force for Newcastle. So Solanke isn't one that floats my boat, and I'm not going anywhere near Bournemouth, unfortunately.
Right, let's move it on to the Gunners then of Arsenal. Predicted lineup. Any big changes there? Because there's been question marks all through this international break period. Erdegaard, Zinchenko. I mean, are you certain that these two are going to start?
I'm never certain. I'm never certain. And we've heard from Mikel Arteta was one of those 1 o'clocks, but we also heard from Antonio Conte on Thursday ahead of this North London derby. Both managers rarely give much away, but particularly because of this derby match, information with regards to team news was definitely on lockdown here. So they were keeping their cards very close to their chest. So, there's question marks with regards to the fitness of Thomas Partey, Zinchenko, and Kieran Tierney. The three sort of big names. You did mention Martin Ødegaard. He trained normally with Norway and did come through those internationals, as far as we know, unscathed. So he should be absolutely fine. So those three players, when asked specifically, would they be in the squad on Saturday, Arteta responded by saying they are all part of the team. Now, what we do know, Partey withdrawn while warming up against Brazil for Ghana in that friendly game against Brazil. It's a knee issue, so it's not related to the thigh problem that he's just recovered from. Not thought to be too serious. So, like I say, that's a 50-50 call. I'm probably lock that in. I mean, the problem is here, you just don't know, given his injury history. If he fails to make it, then it could be Lukonga that comes into that midfield alongside Granit Xhaka. On the left-hand side, Zinchenko, he didn't feature for the Ukraine, but that was only felt to be a minor calf strain and that he would be back after the break. So that's why we have him in. With regards to Kieran Tierney, took a bang on the head against the Republic of Ireland. Again, he was withdrawn from the Scotland squad as a precautionary measure, suspected concussion. As long as he comes through those enhanced care setting protocol, symptom-free, then he will be available. So it's a little bit of a coin toss. Like I say, it's a difficult call to make on this one. I think that the Tierney-Zinchenko one, that's possibly one that I may look to change. We'll see how that goes maybe over the next few hours.
Just one more question in terms of personnel. You've kept White in the team. Tomiyasu, we saw over the international break. He played 90 minutes in at least one game. I don't know on the second game. Why haven't you brought him in the team? Is this purely for tactical reasons? Or do you think that Arsenal are still going to manage that injury conservatively?
Yeah, so he didn't feature in the second international for Japan. I think the first game they beat USA 2-0 and he played 90 minutes and played well. Then the Japanese Football Association released a statement to say that Tomiyasu will be returning to Arsenal. I think they referenced it as something like a squad issue. Reading between the lines, I don't know if they had an agreement in place, given the fact that he's had this heavily disrupted pre-season, these ongoing issues, and they didn't want to push him too hard too soon. I just feel that Mikel Arteta will stick with his tried and tested setup that's served him quite well during this opening period of the season. And of course, he went to Brentford last time out and got a great result down there. So that's why I've left Ben White. But with regards to maybe Tomiyasu, who I do rate really highly, Mikel Arteta has talked about the prospects of maybe, not just necessarily playing on the right-hand side, but also he has, for his national team, played centrally in the heart of that defence. So that's another option, maybe looking ahead at some point.
Yeah, and in terms of Arsenal, not talking about individual assets, but going forward, that does fill me confidence. I am an Arsenal fan, as people can see in the background. I've got the Emirates there. That kind of tactical fluidity between a lot of the players fills me with confidence going forward. But one team that doesn't fill me with much confidence at all at the moment, on many, many reasons, Aston Villa. But what's the team news there? Some people are looking at their fixtures over the next 6 game weeks. They've got a good kind of run there. But what is the kind of situation there? Because they have had some injury problems, especially at the back. Dinnery, Cash, they've not made it into your 11.
They haven't. Matty Cash, we know, missed the internationals with Poland because of a hamstring problem. He's not due to rejoin the first team until Monday. On the opposite flank, Lucas Digne picked up an injury while training with France. French outlet L'Equipe reported that as a hairline fracture, and they suggested that it would be around about 2 to 3 weeks. However, if that injury is actually confirmed, then I would expect that timeline to probably extend beyond that. More realistic might be maybe 3 to 4 to up to maybe 6. With that, the club's saying that the player's being evaluated. He remains unavailable for this moment in time, and there's nothing definitive on when he will return. Elsewhere within that Villa lineup, I've brought Danny Ings back in. I think he's been a little bit unfortunate, and it seems to be an FPL favourite, Leon Bailey, this season. I just don't get it. We've seen him against Southampton, an absolute shocker. Withdrawn, very wasteful with the ball, other than a couple of half decent crosses towards the end of that first half, contributed very little or nothing to the game. So I just think Coutinho coming in, and I've also got Douglas Luiz. replacing the injured Babu Kamara. That's an MCL problem. I think that's probably going to keep him out until after the World Cup in Qatar. But that remains to be seen. Like I say, we don't have anything definitive on that. The other option could possibly be maybe Den Donker, the deadline day sending from Wolves. He came on in the last game, so he is another option. But I think Gerrard will stick with Luiz just for this one.
So that's a good insight there. As always, with anybody listening, if you've got questions about specific players and want us to, talk about any that we've already covered as well, we will go through that. But I'm going to skip through Aston Villa just because I don't think many people are too interested at the moment. I could be wrong, but just their form. Yes, they do have decent fixtures over the next 6, but realistically, there's better options elsewhere, especially at their price points as well. One of those teams that I think are catching the eye is Brentford. Any kind of big news there? Because when we last spoke, Ben, it was kind of all plain sailing for the Bees.
Yeah, certainly in terms of their injuries, there's not much change in the treatment room. Lewis Potter picked up an ankle ligament problem last time out against Arsenal, so that keeps him on the sidelines. Christian Norgard, no further forward. Ethan Pinnock is a player who could potentially return to the squad, but by Thomas Frank's own admission, he admits, it's a department where they're well stocked, so there's no need to take any chances. We've seen a slight tweak in his formation in game week 8 to a 3-5-2. That was to accommodate Christoph Ayer. I preferred that 4-3-3, not the 3-5-2. So it remains to be seen, if that result has any kind of influence on his thinking ahead of this one. New signing is a Damsgaard, is a player who hasn't featured a lot since his arrival, and the reason being really just that lack of fitness, sharpness, and also getting an understanding of his new teammates and that philosophies. Thomas Frank has come out and he said, look, now he's in a position where I can pick him without any doubt in the back of my mind. So, like I say, he won't be too far away from a starting berth.
Excellent. And so Ivan Toney's the one that I've got my eyes on. He's been, I think, throughout the whole of the season, you and I have kind of touted him as the best differential option at the moment. And just that fantastic team news there fills me with confidence of having him in my team. But one team that maybe has lost their zeal, lost the kind of glow, is Brighton. First of all, because of the fact that they've lost Graham Potter. But second of all, they've got a really, really tough run of fixtures over the next few game weeks. I think they're one of, in fact, they are the worst run of fixtures of all teams. They've got Liverpool, Tottenham, Brentford, Nottingham Forest, Man City and Chelsea. I mean, it's kind of probably time to ship their assets, but they're still fairly well owned. A lot of people went in on Gross, McAllister, and even Dunk has been in a fair few teams. But what is the injury situation there as they take on Liverpool this weekend?
Yeah, a mixed bag, in all honesty. Adam Lallana could return to the side, or certainly the matchday squad. He's been sidelined in recent times because of a calf problem. But the Seagulls do lose Enoch Mwepu. Now, he picked up an undisclosed illness while on international duty. I understand that kept him hospitalised for 4 days. Now, that's going to keep him out of the reckoning altogether. Now, the difficulty here is, the Seagulls have a new boss in Roberto De Zerba. How exactly he will set up and which personnel he look to deploy remains to be seen. I have went with a 3-5-2 here at the setup, and I think that was the last game that Potter probably played as the Brighton boss. Now, from what I do know is that De Zerba likes to go with a back 4, so there may need to be a little bit of a tweak and possibly a 4-2-3-1. So maybe it's the same personnel, but possibly set up in a slightly different fashion.
I've also just put up a poll for everybody. Get involved. Let us know who your captain is, and we'll release it at the end of the video, and also we'll tell you what the kind of latest data of that. And if people want to know the tactics of the new manager as well, we can discuss that maybe on a video another time, because he is an exciting manager. He's had quite a cool route over to Brighton. He could be another one of their amazing gems that they find. But one of the teams that we touted. So just to remind people, we put out a few videos this week focusing on the data. We've done some deep analysis. We've looked at fixtures. We've looked at the best attacks. We've got some other stuff coming out just before deadline as well, some differential picks that you might be interested in. But one of the teams that really featured highly, especially for me, is Chelsea. The likes of Sterling, but even Fofana and Reece James could be in there. I mean, Fofana is a huge differential, 4.4 defender in one of the best defences, and you've put him in there. You think he's starting this week? I mean, 4.4 price for a Chelsea defender. I mean, that's obscene value, isn't it, Ben?
Yeah, you want to have a slice of that, in all fairness, especially if Graham Potter can begin to replicate, what he implemented while during his time at Brighton. Of course, it's still early days. There's a lot of work to do at Stamford Bridge, but he's had an opportunity, lots of time on the training pitches to implement his own philosophies and tactics, and hopefully we'll see an improved defensive performances from Chelsea going forward.
Yeah, I think Chelsea, they could be new manager bounce, but also maybe better management under Graham Potter. I don't know. But yeah, Sterling, is Aubameyang 100% fine then? Is he's going to be in the starting 11?
Look, Chelsea need goals, and that's the long and the short of it. I've omitted Havertz from that starting 11, which is a little bit controversial. So that's a little bit going against the grain. It's not a team that I'm 100% locked in. What I would say about Cucurella as well on the left, he has been struggling with illness. How that's affected him on the training pitches, don't fully understand at this moment in time. He is available, but again, that might come down to, if he has missed a lot, then Potter may look to turn to Ben Chilwell. And a lot of people would have seen N'Golo Kanté back on the training pitches this week. Again, a boost seeing that Frenchman back after his recent hamstring problem. However, I don't expect him to be involved in the matchday squad. It could be maybe looking forward to game week 10 before we see him, pushing for a place.
Now, before we move on to Crystal Palace, the Eagles, we've got a couple of questions from people here for you, Ben. First of all, any news on Kulu from Tottenham and Isaac as well?
Isaac, as in Alexander Isaac, from Newcastle, picked up a thigh problem while training with Sweden. Initial concerns that it could be a fairly lengthy absence, but fortunately he's had a scan on Tyneside, isn't as severe as first thought. We're maybe looking mid to late October, so possibly 2 to 3 weeks with regards to that. The return of Callum Wilson helps to ease that burden in attack. And what was the other one there, Jason? Sorry, I missed that one.
Kulu from Tottenham.
And Kulu. You'll have to refresh me. Oh, right. Oh. This
Sorry
one.
for confusing.
Yeah, this is serious question mark. It's an injury that was picked up in the 70th minute, I believe, in and around that 70th minute, while on international duty. He did complete the full match, but that exacerbated the problem, and he's reporting a lot of discomfort there. Now, again, I touched upon it before, Conte wouldn't disclose any team news. This was on Thursday. They had a final session booked in for today. Decisions will be made in that respect. What I have said is, if Kuvaletsky is past fit, then I would expect him to drop to the bench anyway, with Richarlison, Kane, and then the hat-trick hero Heung-min Son occupying those three attacking spots. If indeed he does go with a 3-4-3, because there's a lot of talk again that he might switch to a 3-5-2.
And so let's move it on then to Crystal Palace. What's the situation there? Is there any big team news?
Unfortunately not. I don't want to do a disservice to Palace and their supporters. James Tompkins returns to the matchday squad following a lengthy absence with a calf problem. Hasn't featured since the end of July, but elsewhere, no change.
Yeah, and just again to remind people, do check out the differential video. Wilfried Zaha is one of the players that I've kind of picked. But moving on to the Toffees of Everton, they've had not the best performances, but Neil Maupay, you think he keeps his place? Calvert-Lewin is not fit enough yet?
Yeah, and I mean, it might have went under the radar. There was certainly no mention from Frank Lampard during Thursday's press conference. We know that Calvert-Lewin has been struggling with that knee ligament problem. That was an LCL, so that's the outer ligament, that lateral collateral ligament. But he also tweaked his groin early on in the week, and that kept him out for a few days. So just for that reason alone, I suspect that Calvert-Lewin, it certainly won't start, and there are no guarantees that he'll make that match day squad. Of course, Everton won last time out. The only two changes I foresee: Jordan Pickford back in contention after recovering from a thigh injury, and then Nathan Patterson ruled out after getting injured for Scotland, and Seamus Coleman, who I fully expect to come in and make his first Premier League start of the season.
There you go. So we can move on to the next team, Fulham. Now, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this one. What's the latest Mitrovic news, Ben?
Yeah, the latest, this one press conference was literally sort of just finishing as we came live on air. But where you get very little from Marco Silva in terms of a definitive answer. What he did say about Alexander Mitrovic when asked about facing his former club, he actually stated that, or he hinted that Mitrovic was okay. He said he doesn't need any motivation to play for Fulham or his national team. When he goes on that football pitch, he always gives 100%. Now, for those people who are a little bit unsure as to what we're talking about, Mitrovic picked up a knock in the first game for Serbia when he scored his hat-trick. He seemed to brush that aside, and then he scored again against Norway in the Nations League. But he left the game, looked to be limping quite badly with his right ankle, heavily strapped with a cold pack application. But again, there's a suggestion that may just have been a heavy knock. And like I say, Marco Silva suggested that Mitrovic is okay, and more importantly, that he will be in line for a start.
That is big news then. A lot of the community have been sweating on that. And you're probably a bit worried as a Newcastle fan that he's going to be there. Let's move it on to Leeds, though. Again, there's a couple of differentials in here that I've got my eye on in the coming weeks. But what is their injury situation like? Are they going to be going into this good run of fixtures fully fit?
The squad is certainly looking a lot healthier than in recent times. A quick update: Junior Firpo, he's recovered. Luke Ayling, he's also back in contention, and Liam Cooper. So that's helped boost our numbers. We do know that Adam Forshaw picked up an ankle problem, twisted his ankle in training, so he's out of this weekend. No mention of Rodrigo, by the way. That was a shoulder issue. The club decided to go down a conservative route in terms of treatment, so no surgery, but it looks like he's going to miss out. So there's a few places where, particularly on the right-hand side, where I've got Christensen there for the moment. Like I say, Ayling might be one that could come in. Patrick Bamford, a few people asking about him, scored a hat-trick for the under-21 side. He was put in there just to build a little bit of fitness and sharpness, but elsewhere, like I say, it's pretty much as you were for Leeds.
So the next team up is Leicester City. A lot of people have been, talking about the Foxes as potential template breakers, few differentials in that team as well. I mean, what is the injury situation there? Because previously, the form of the team has been, people have described it as, the injuries have cost them. But is that going to be the story going forward? Does Brendan Rodgers have any excuses now?
Well, long-term absentees: Ricardo Pereira, ruptured Achilles, and Ryan Bertrand, knee misendectomy. They're the two sort of main absences, but really the Foxes should be well accommodated to be able to, to cover those places. With regards to their next game, which is a Monday, those extra recovery days will help. Wilfred Ndidi picked up a hamstring injury with his national team. However, Brendan Rodgers does expect him to be okay. Now, I have Sumari in that holding role in midfield. Given the news that Ndidi will be fit, that could be a straight switch. And I've also recalled Jamie Vardy to that starting 11. Patson Daka had been given the nod for the Foxes last time out, but Patson Daka was one of those that was hospitalised alongside Enoch Mwepu while on international duty. He only spent a couple of days, so he didn't get the brunt of whatever happened to those couple of players. But I'm just, like I say, we're going tried and tested. Vardy will have hopefully, benefited from those that recovery time, and Patson Daka may not be 100%, so that's why I went Vardy.
I just want to bring it back to Leeds. We've had a couple of questions on Rodrigo. What's the news there? Because some people are thinking if he's back, if he's fit, he could be the potential differential player that a lot of people are looking at, because others are looking at Harrison, Sinisterra, even Aronson. When he was fit, when he was ready, he looked fantastic. Why isn't he back in the team after this international break period?
Look, I just want to put it back out there that I was on the very, very early from game week 1. Rodrigo is following a brilliant
yes,
pre-season.
Differential king.
So I'll take that. And his ownership, I think at one point went up to well over 20%. Now, again, just to sort of reiterate, if you missed, the club decided to go down that conservative route instead of surgery for that soldier, which could have potentially kept him out for a lengthy period. Now, the expectation was maybe a 4, 5, or possibly 6 weeks return to play. It looks as if this game week will probably come a little bit too soon. But if he was involved or certainly available, just given the fact that he spent that time out of the side, then that's just that little bit of sharpness that he'd be lacking, and I certainly wouldn't expect him to be pushing for a start. And you also need to contextualise, Patrick Bamford scores that hat-trick for the 21s, he's looking sharp, so there's maybe not that need to rush back Rodrigo as he would have before. Bamford can ease that burden.
Yeah, this is the situation as well. Just quickly, I don't want to take up too much time because we've got a few more teams to get through. But when we say that players are back, that doesn't mean that they're going to be fully fit on the pitch. There's this factoring in of return to play doesn't mean return to form. Rodrigo was looking fantastic, but it might take him a few games to get back up to those levels. And Jesse Marsch will be very mindful of that as well. But let's move past the Foxes and on to Liverpool. And I think this is huge news here, Ben. Jota starting up front.
Now, this is definitely one that I could potentially change. Jota was not part of the training group on Thursday. Also, Nunez, missed out, and Diaz. Now, Diaz was put down to a late return from international duty, whereas Jota and Nunez, that was more fatigue related. So as a precaution, Jurgen Klopp, we know that Jota had that heavily disrupted pre-season, or certainly a lack of a pre-season after picking up that hamstring injury playing for Portugal. So given the fact that he has returned and he's on moderated training, I think it could be Roberto Firmino, in all honesty. I think, Jurgen Klopp maybe would have preferred to start Jota in the league with Firmino in the Champions League, but those roles could be flipped just to give Jota that additional recovery time. Like I say, maybe bring him off the bench 15, 20 minutes and then keep him fresh for Europe next week.
And so elsewhere in the team, the other thing is that Robertson's still out of the 11. When is he likely to be back?
Yeah, he's not too far away in actual fact, but certainly it's too soon this weekend. That's why we have Tsimikas in there. Jordan Henderson is another omission, which we just returned from our hamstring problem, got minutes for England against Germany. Of course, if he was to be pushing for a start, then it would probably be Harvey Elliott, the player that would miss out.
Now, am I right in guessing it's a full bill of health for Manchester City? There's no real big injury news, or is John Stones going to be out?
John Stones is out. It's not thought to be long-term, certainly not a 4, 5 or 6 weeker, as Pep put it, but maybe, a 7 to 10 or maybe up to 14 days. Aymeric Laporte is a player that people have been looking at. He has been on the training pitches, but he's still doing aspects of training individually. So again, he's not quite ready to be in contention for a start.
And when I say full bill of health, obviously Calvin Phillips is still out with his shoulder injury. He's getting surgery on that. But what I mean is the kind of team we've become accustomed to this season. Now, Ronaldo is making it into the Manchester United 11. we saw like a pretty bad facial injury to him during the international break. But was that just mainly, I mean, does that not come under the concussion protocols, or was that A-OK?
Yeah, just a superficial cut clash, I think, with a Czech goalkeeper. Nothing too major. Completed 90 minutes and then trained as normal for Portugal and has featured. So, look, he'll take that one on the chin or on the nose, as the case may be. And the reason I've got Ronaldo in there, we have heard from Eric Ten Hag, Marcus Rashford hamstring has trained this week, and also Anthony Martial. That's been an ongoing Achilles issue. It will come down to, I don't think Martial is even in a position to be pushing for a start, given his lack of game time recently. It would be between Ronaldo and Rashford. But as we always know, with those hamstring problems, you need to treat them very, very carefully. High re-injury, high recurrence rates. So that's why I'm just leaning towards Ronaldo. Like I say, given the fact that although Rashford did get Player of the Month for September for his performances for United.
He was looking good, and he was somebody that I potentially had my eye on, but then because of this injury, there's no justification at the moment. Newcastle, though, there's a bit of an injury issue here with the club, especially up top. So Wilson, you think, will be starting? I mean, is there not going to be caution because of his injury history, or do you see him going straight back in?
I mean, absolutely, you need to be cautious with Callum Wilson, given his ongoing injury issues. Eddie Howe talked about building up the players' resilience to these injuries, and you can only do that by playing minutes in the Premier League. I certainly think Callum Wilson's better off starting game when he's fully warmed up and be able to go through those proper routines, as opposed to maybe coming off the bench, where you're limited to working by the side of the pitch and it's maybe questionable. Maybe not ideal in the fact that we have to start him, potentially straight away. But the injuries to Isaac, Alan San-Maxim, possibly, and also Chris Wood, mean that Eddie Howe hasn't been left with much choice there. But he has been training normally with the squad now for the last 10 days, so he is in a good place, and I can certainly see maybe a 60 to 70 minutes from Wilson down at Craven Cottage.
And it could be a good opportunity for him to get on the scoreboard as well, because Fulham's defence, as good as they've been going forward, they haven't been great at the back. Nottingham Forest, I don't know if many people will be invested in the team. Is there any quick injury news on them, or can we skip over them, Ben?
Yeah, I don't want to downplay any team, but look, there's nothing major. We haven't heard back from Steve Cooper. As it stands, that press conference is still in the offing. A couple of issues slightly. The big one being Scott McKenna, the ever-present, was released from the Scotland squad due to what they described as a knee strain. Now that, again, means that there's problems on the left-hand side of that defence, and just how Steve Cooper will look to shuffle things up to cover that if McKenna isn't available remains to be seen. Emmanuel Dennis is a player who I did like down at Watford. Hasn't had much of a chance yet at Forest, but he was called up on international duty, attended the first or second day of training, and then unfortunately suffered a setback. So he was back in the UK, and it doesn't look like he's going to be starting this weekend either.
Let's move it on to the Saints then, Ben. What is the injury situation there?
Nothing major. As you were, Tino Livramento not expected to be back until the beginning of 2023, and Romeo Lavia, hamstring injury, probably still 2, maybe 3 weeks away. So really changes will just become from a tactical standpoint. The Saints were extremely poor, let's just say, last time out against Aston Villa. So I certainly expect 1 or 2 changes. I've got Aribo back in there for the Saints. I do like him. I think he's a good option. I drop in Elyounoussi. Again, we talked about that lackluster display from Leon Bailey. Elyounoussi on the opposition side that night was as equally as bad.
Now, Tottenham, this is a huge game this weekend. Could be deciding second, third place in the Premier League already, kind of. That's how huge this is. But what is the Tottenham team news at the moment? There's question marks, as we said. Kulu, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but Lloris, you've put him in your team. Is the injury not that worrying?
It was severe enough to keep him out of the French squad, and people always talk about this international injuries. Let's, again, contextualize and put a caveat here that there's a difference between non-competitive games and competitive matches, and whether players are, a club cannot decide not to allow a player to travel. All of these players are assessed independently, and if they're not, FIFA can impose sanctions on those players. So let's just forget about, the managers applying pressure and, so on and so forth, and Tottenham wanting to keep Hugo Lloris back because he's had such a great start of the season. There was a thigh injury. He isn't 100%. Will he play? And, Conte said he was hopeful. I think he gets the nod. Just maybe there may be some modified kicking in terms of, because that's how that was the mechanism that caused the problem against Leicester. So maybe he'd be looking to do a little bit shorter gameplay, maybe play out the back a little bit more. But I think, like I say, Lloris gets a nod. If there are any problems or any question marks in training on Friday, then Fraser Forster comes in. Antonio Conte did suggest that he won't be taking any risks with players. I think Tottenham have got something like 13 games in around 43 days, and he's going to need a full complement of players, to get through this period, this congested period, and he cannot really afford to carry too many injuries.
We've got a question on Doherty. I mean, what is the news there, Ben? Because he was fantastic last season. He looked to be the kind of archetypal Conte defender, and now Emerson Royale is starting week in, week out. Is that tactical? Is that injury?
Certainly tactical. But by his own admission, Matt Doherty said he wasn't fully over that injury, just in terms of that sharpness, that freshness. He didn't feel 100% comfortable. He has had minutes during the international break, which will certainly help. So we could see Doherty playing more of a key role, during this period. We did see last time out, I think it was against Leicester, we've seen Perisic switch flanks and Session move in on the left-hand side. So, Conte is not afraid to switch up those fullbacks and, like I say, utilize players on the opposite flank. But for this one, I'm going back with Perisic on the left and Emerson on the right.
We're going to bring it back quickly to Newcastle. We covered it a little bit earlier, but Lars Steele wants to know, did Ben say anything about when Isaac would be back, before or after game week 12?
I'd be very disappointed if Isaac wasn't back in contention for game week 12. Initial timeline around maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So optimistically, I would say mid-October. And then, we'll see after that point. But scan results come back favourable, not as severe as first thought.
And so let's turn our attention to West Ham. We're getting close to the end here. What is the latest with the Hammers?
We haven't heard from David Moyes, or shall I say, I haven't been able to access that. We had to jump straight on that live stream, but nothing major in terms of injury updates. Ben Johnson is a player who has been back on the training pitches, so potentially he's somebody that could force his way back into the reckoning. But I don't really see too many changes, with regards to fullbacks, with Soufal and Cresswell playing there. Scamacca maybe comes into this team. I'll have a little bit of a thing, but that would mean West Ham going with something like maybe a 4-2-3-1 with Antonio leading the line. One of the concerns always with regards to Antonio around the international break is his involvement with Jamaica and, of course, those long-haul flights. But I think he's just had the one game and he should be absolutely fine. Returned nice and early, so that's why I've got him. And I have sort of tweaked. It's more of a 4-2-2-2. In essence, with Bowen being pushed higher up there and Antonio. Again, West Ham need goals.
They do indeed. There's big questions over the Hammers at the moment. It's kind of unbelievable what's happening with them. Final team that we're covering is Wolves, and then I don't know if we'll have much time for more questions, Ben. I think you got to shoot off. What is the Wolves situation?
Diego Costa, he will be included in the matchday squad this weekend. So that's a big boost for Wolves and Bruno Lage. Now, he remained very coy on whether there's a potential start there. What I would say is Diego Costa hasn't played a competitive game since December 2021. So yes, he has had a good couple of weeks on the training pitches, but still, it may be a big risk for Bruno Lage. But, Wolves again need goals and they need points on the board. And he also, Bruno Lage, sort of again suggested or hinted that maybe Diego Costa's in line for a start. He said that we're a different team when we have a striker who's fully fit on the pitch. Of course, they've lost Raul Jimenez to that adductor issue, and also Sasa Kladnic, if I've got that right, who suffered that ACL rupture on his debut. A couple of updates here, which again aren't included because we had to jump straight on air. Hee-chan looks as if he's going to be out. And also Adama Traore, we're hoping he's going to be cleared to play. Elsewhere, the only other change, or maybe up for discussion, is in defence. Nathan Collins is going to serve that 3-match ban following his horror tackle last time out. I have Totti in that back line. He would move on the left-hand side, with Max Kilman moving across to the right-hand side. So that would be his first Premier League start of the season.
So, final questions here. Ben, has Emerson now lost his starting place in the long term? And Jandre has said, Emerson doing well in Europe, should he not be first choice?
I am presuming Emerson, West Ham.
Sorry.
Look, Aaron Cresswell is his first choice. He's a firm favourite with David Moyes. And let's not forget, and I don't want to do the competition any kind of disservice, but we're comparing apples and pears here when we're talking about Premier League football and European Conference, and in terms of those performances. And yes, Emerson has done a decent role, but when it comes down to those big games, those big matches, those big calls, I would firmly expect Aaron Cresswell to get that nod on the left-hand side.
So I think that's it, Ben, for this week. We do this every week. We've kind of somebody's asked in the questions. I think it was Andre again. This is what was the hub kind of predicted lineup stream. Now it's the Premier Injuries lineup stream.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what happened with the hub, actually. I think I just got bombed out. The bombed us out, and a lot of people still seem to like this. So we moved it across to Premier because that's what the people wanted. And we're a channel for the people, Jason.
We are the people's channel, I don't know. I was going to say something controversial there. I'll keep my lips sealed. But yeah, it's always a pleasure, everybody. So make sure through the week we have lots of videos coming out. We've got my kind of data-based ones. Ben and I work on a few differential things. We like to look at the differentials rather than the big headliners. We're always looking for a template buster, aren't we? So make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you stay up to date with that. Through the week, you can always send us questions on the videos in the comments, but you can also tweet Ben. You can also tweet me. You can message us any way that you feel fit, and just interact with the channel. We love interacting with you. Like the videos if you've enjoyed them. Give us some feedback. We're always all ears. But we will be back again next week, and we